Welcome to Focus on the Candidates. I'm I'll be talking to my two friends from New York City, Steve Behar, who ran for city council, and many years ago he ran for the assembly, and Blake Morris, who a few years back ran for the state senate. And we're going to have a lively discussion on the primary yesterday and Mandami's win. So, Steve, you know Mandami's lawyer, and Blake, you know Mandami.
I,
So,
I know
um,
I know him too.
okay.
We both
So,
had him.
Blake, I'd like you to start. Your thoughts on yesterday.
Oh, it's amazing. This is something I had a lot of anx I don't know if I want to say I had a lot of confident I had anxiety and confidence at the same time. So I was confident that he was going to win, but I also had the anxiety that something could happen because anything can happen in an election. And there was a lot of money spent against him, a lot of slime, a lot of vitriol against him. So I'm very happy that the election is now behind us.
Mhm.
I was definitely in my mind thinking about it all the time. You know, I met Zoran back in 2018, the week he got naturalized as a citizen, and he told me then he was going to be mayor of the city one day.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So he is a man with a plan. I mean, he started off with his other careers as a rapper and he did something else. I mean, he was a filmmaker. I forgot what else he did. But by the time I met him by 2018, he already had a plan.
Steve, what do you think?
Well, I think, it's funny how, it's funny how I got to know Zoran, and I don't know him well. But when I ran for city council back in 2021, Um, one of the candidates, which I didn't win that race, one of the candidates who also didn't win in that race was supported by the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. And on election day, I spent over an hour, probably maybe an hour and a half, with Zoran at a poll site. And we were giving out literature for me. I was giving out for me, and he was giving it out for his candidate. But we chatted for over an hour, and he's an impressive guy. He's very smart, very articulate. He's a charming guy, and you saw that come out in this campaign.
Right. Do you think that people um, think of him as a socialist? Steve, what do you think? You think um, we're going to the Finland station here?
Well, I mean, I think that's what he says he is, and that's some of his policies are definitely socialist. But I think that the problem we have in this country is that people throw around the word socialist or communist, and they don't know what it means. And when I was teaching Introduction to U.S. Politics at SUNY Old Westbury, and we had one of my lectures was about different economic systems, and I explained to the students that there is no pure socialism in the world, and there is no pure capitalism in the world. But we have systems that, depending, if the socialism is here and capitalism is here, it's where each economy is on the spectrum there, between those two different systems. For example, the sanitation department in New York City, that's socialism. Socialism means an economic system where the government owns the factors of production. Well, the sanitation department is a government-run uh, garbage collection service. The police department is socialism. It's a government-run security service. Public schools are socialism. Medicare is socialism. Social Security is socialism. So there is already a lot of socialism in our system of government, in our system of our economy. It's just where we are on the spectrum. So, when someone says he's a capitalist or a socialist, nobody's pure. Nobody is a pure capitalist. No one is a pure socialist. It's where we move, and the DSA want to move further on that spectrum than we are now.
What about you, Blake? What do you think?
So I think we've had a disservice. We didn't start off this way. I think we started this disservice sometime in the 1970s of this confusion between socialism and capitalism. We actually did, at one time, the public actually did know what was happening. They did understand the labels. I don't know if people agreed or not agreed to each particular thing, but we definitely had a level of knowledge that the body politic has lost, and our friends at corporate media and the national political parties are not eager to correct. So basically, as Steve, if I could add on to what Steve was saying, if I can continue what he was saying about public institutions like sanitation, like public schools. So back in the 1880s, when the socialists, because that's when they were there, when the socialists in the 1880s, they said we want to have public schools, grades 1 through 5. And that was a radical idea in the 1880s that we were gonna have publicly funded education for grades 1 through 5. And so that's what we did. The country adopted state by state a socialist construct of public schools, that it'd be mandatory for children to attend public school, and mandatory that property owners would have to pay a property tax to actually pay for those schools. And we've moved on. We used to have private water supply. Now we have municipal water supply. Many localities actually have public, the electric companies is owned by the government, or by a cooperative that's controlled by the government. We have private electricity here in New York State, but we also have the power authority, right? So that's public power that the New York State itself controls, power dams and power generating facilities and transmission lines. So the it's not that we're capitalistic or socialistic. We are a socialistic country already. The question is, to what degree do you want to be socialistic? I saw an interesting report a few weeks ago about GDP. So for all Western democracies, any industrialized Western democracy, um, the government um, takes up 35% of GDP. Well, makes 35% of GDP. And actually, I'm going to just rephrase that again. So in Western democracies, not including the United States or Switzerland, the government's portion makes up 50% of GDP. It's only the United States and Switzerland that the government makes up 35% of GDP. And the difference between the US and Switzerland and the rest of industrialized Western democracies is that they provide universal health care. That's the 15%. So when people are fighting about they don't want universal health care, we could be clear what they're fighting over is that they don't want the government to be at 50%. They're happy to be at 35% and to have all the inefficiencies and the expense of not having universal health care. So basically, even the people who are the most rabid saying, I am against socialism, they're socialists because they go to public schools. If you're really an anti-socialist, then you have to say, I don't want a state university system. I don't want a city university system. I do not want municipal water. I don't want K through 12 public schools, right? If you're anti-socialist, you'd have to say these are all the things that you don't want, and you don't want the public to pay for them. Because even, and I'm sorry for being so long-winded, but I've been fighting people on social media about this for the last couple of months, is that even if you're a voucher supporter, let's say you're a voucher supporter, all these people running around saying, I'm anti-socialist, I'm anti teachers union, I want a voucher system for charter schools or for private schools. Well, they're still saying they want a voucher system. They still want the government to pay for it. They still want to impose taxes on the public and still have someone pay for it. So they're still in a socialistic model. So there's no one out there saying, I don't want the government to collect any money for public education, and I want everyone to get their own money and get their own schools and get their own water supply. And so no one is saying that. So there's this fiction out there of capitalism. We haven't had unadulterated or tainted capitalism probably since the 1790s, because once the country started, or even actually before, because that's the claim of the US Post Office, they actually started operations before we had a US government, that because the US Post Office itself is a form of socialism. So, so even at the very beginning, there's always been one element of socialism in government and in our economy.
A lot of my friends who are right of center are freaking out over free buses. Steve, what do you think?
You know, if he can do it, great. I mean, I think there's a structural issue there, is that the buses are run by a state authority, not by the city. Um, so I'm not sure how he plans to do it. But I've always been in favor of inexpensive or free mass transit. So if it's possible to do it, great. And I've always proposed to eliminate the MTA completely and just put the system on make it budget lines on whatever jurisdiction, whether it's the county or the city or the state, or just make it a budget line and get rid of this big authority that's the MTA, that's a big inefficient waste of money.
Blake?
Well, this is so again. So Steve is an excellent opener. So the empty so the uh, so what happens is back in 1968, the city gave well, actually, they leased for $1 the all the buses and subways to the newly formed New York State Metropolitan Transportation Authority. So technically, all the buses and subways are actually owned by New York City, and they're on loan. So, and then they're on loan to the MTA. And so the MTA, they're the people who actually operate the subways and buses. So, and for years I was in a kitchen cabinet, which is an informal policy group within the Transit Authority, which is the operational arm of the MTA that actually operates the subways and buses. And we would set policy and help other people set policy within the authority for subways and buses. So in those days, the fare evasion on buses was roughly around like 1/4. But now the fare evasion of buses is running at basically 50%. So one half of the fares on the buses are not being recovered, and 25% of all bus riders are transferring to the subway by free transfer. So we don't we eliminated the double fare zone concept when the Metro card was initiated. So for the last 20 years or 25 years, we've not had the old-fashioned double fare zone. So basically, one half the bus riders are not paying their fare because they're fare evaders, and 25% of the bus riders are basically, if they don't pay the fare in the bus, they're going to pay the fare when they transfer on the subway because they only pay once, which leaves 25% of the people, of 25% of the riders on buses actually paying the fare. And so, uh, as a structural concept, you do want to collect the fare because there's a lot of, I don't want to go into, but there's a lot of mathematical finance reasons why you need to have the fare box collecting revenue. But the MTA is very bad at their job. They're not collecting the fare, so it doesn't matter if you have a fare. If you're not collecting it, you're basically de facto not. You're basically de facto creating a fare-free bus. So basically, you only need to replace 25% of you only have to replace 25% of the revenue on the buses because the rest of the revenue isn't coming to the buses anyway. And Mandami's solution is, well, his proposal, I would say, is coming up to you, Cynthia, up in Albany to the state legislature to ask for a 2% a 2% increase of the income tax on people making over $1 million a year. Right now, the state income tax um, ends at $75,000. I mean, right. So at $75,000, there's no more percentage increase. So he would say if you make over $1 million a year, he would add a 2% surcharge on the income tax to help pay for this proposal of the free buses. And he also has a proposal to corporations that have gross revenues of over $10 million a year would pay 2.5% more on their corporate income tax, which would equal the corporate rate that they charge in New Jersey. And that those two taxes, according to Mamdani math, would pay for the free buses and pay for the universal child care, which is actually the bigger budget item. The child care is way more expensive than the free buses.
My friends, my right of center friends again are freaking out over the 2%. They think that 2% is going to drive everybody out of New York City. What do you think?
So, which is interesting because the Texas governor, so this is the concept that the 2% would drive people making more than $1 million a year out of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they're already paying city income tax. Yeah, very few people on this, there's a very small percentage of the state um, that I think it's like less than 1%, and they actually pay like 40% of the state income tax. But they're already paying. So if these people haven't moved out already, then I don't see why 2% would make much of a difference to them. And what's interesting is that the people that would move out would be the people making over $1 million. And so Texas and Florida are saying that they don't want those people. They said they don't want the refugees from New York City, which is kind of a conflict of the concept. Are they saying they don't want the millionaire? They don't want people making more than $1 million a year. So the logic itself collapses upon itself. And as you know, the state actually increased the state income tax for 2% for millionaires a few years ago, and we lost a few billionaires. We did lose a few billionaires, but we actually gained thousands of new millionaires in New York State. So just because you raise the tax 2% does not seem to scare away people making over $1 million a year.
What do you think, Steve?
I I agree with Blake. Every time something happens, someone gets elected, or is a new policy that people don't like on the right, everyone's going to leave New York. But if you look, and I actually had posted this on social media a week ago. if you look, with the exception of the quick loss of people during COVID that quickly came back, over the last, say, 30 years, the population of New York has been pretty steady. We're sitting at 8.4, 8.5, 8.6 million people in the city, and that's where it is. And the idea that these people who are making over $1 million a year are making over $1 million a year because they're in New York City. And if they think they can go to Corpus Christi, Texas, or Pensacola, Florida, and make the same money, they're kidding themselves. So New York is the finance capital of the world. It's where the accountants, the finance people, the investment banks, the lawyers get together. It's the media center of the world. If you're leaving, where are you going? So I don't really take these threats seriously.
So, there's a lot of scare tactics that they used on the right wing media, um, with Mamdani being a Muslim. Now, Steve, you're half Catholic and half Jewish, and Blake, you're Jewish, correct?
Yes.
So both of you weren't too upset with people. Do you consider um Mamdani an anti-Semite?
I'll let Blake go first on this one, and then
This point. So this point I make all the time on social media is you can disagree. And this point I make all the time, and this is a conversation ender. So I'm putting Steve in a hard place. So this is what I tell people on social media. I ask people I ask this question. I ask, um, if a person disagrees with the current Israeli parliamentary ruling coalition on their government policies, what does that make that person? If you disagree with the Israeli government's parliamentary ruling coalition, what does that mean who you are? And almost no one ever responds. And sometimes we get some Israelis respond, and they'll say, well, it just means that you didn't vote for the ruling coalition. It's a democracy. You just didn't, that wasn't your policy. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that it means that you actually voted for the majority parties, and the ruling coalition has to cobble together all the minority parties to get a ruling coalition. So Mamdani, he's been fighting the word police. His first victory was not the primary. His first victory was over the word police. That he came into the race and he said, I'm not going to shy away from the first fight, which is the fight over language, the fight over what we're talking about. Because the vast majority of Americans and voters in New York City don't agree with the Israeli government's ruling parliamentary coalition and their policies. And but elected officials couldn't say that because the word police had all kinds of tags to put on them, and one of those tags would be that you're a Jew hater. I don't particularly care for the word anti-Semitism because actually anti-Semitism is actually a word created by a Jew hater in the 1870s in Central Europe. So I don't even like that word. So let's just be clear about it. So his first achievement was to able to break through and beat the word police, and the word police is still very angry about that. And I'm still finding people on social media saying, well, it's not right. It's not right that people can just like talk their mind and speak freely and not and not suffer the consequences. So, and he has said nothing. And I also ask people, if you think he has any hatred toward Jews, and give me a quote. Give me something he said. Give me something that he did. And it's always been crickets.
Steve?
You're right, Blake. You took a lot of my thunder there, but so I feel the same way, and I've been saying the same thing over and over again. Um, I'm a very strong supporter of the state of Israel. And I've got cousins that I'm very close with that I communicate constantly with there. I visited Israel just a few years ago. My wife and I took a trip. We visited my cousins in Israel. And I'm very critical of this Netanyahu administration that's there, Netanyahu's coalition. Um, as is, by the way, probably 90% of my cousins who live in Israel. My when you see these protests of hundreds of thousands of people protesting against Netanyahu in Tel Aviv, my cousins are in there. And I don't think they're anti-Semitic because they're protesting against Bibi Netanyahu. Just like I consider myself very patriotic, but I protest against Trump. So I think the problem that we have is there's certain portion of our population that that takes anybody who criticizes the state of Israel as being anti-Semitic. And especially if someone who's a Muslim criticizes the state of Israel, they automatically try to paint them as anti-Semitic. And they're not. They're just condemning or protesting government policies that they don't believe in. Just like, I'm out here protesting Donald Trump on almost daily basis. And I think the difference is if somebody starts talking about the Jews this, the Jews that, that's anti-Semitism. When you're talking about, an entire people trying to fit them into some sort of box or try to, put a trope on an entire population. The same thing with Muslims. You had ignorant people in this election saying Muslims are terrorists. And I mean, it's despicable. And that's Islamophobia. And neither anti-Semitism nor Islamophobia are acceptable. But you can criticize the government of Israel, and you can criticize a Muslim-run government in the Middle East and not be anti-Semitic and not be an Islamophobe. And I think that's what we kind of need to get to ourselves to. And I haven't seen anywhere where uh, Mamdani has said the Jewish people, the Jews are this or that.
Mhm. So a couple of days ago, some reporter asked Hakeem Jeffries if Mamdani was the new face of the Democratic Party, and he said no. Um, is that going to hurt the is that going to hurt Jeffries, and does that hurt the possibility of maybe getting the majority back in the House? Blake?
You're getting a hot topic. I love this topic. This is a topic I love. So no one knows. I mean, there's a handful of people in this country that know this, and so many more people need to know the thing I'm about to tell you. And elected officials for some reason, don't want to share this level of knowledge, which I don't understand why they don't want to share it. So we'll get right to the facts. So there are three, well, so there is no such thing. It does not exist as as a Republican Party or a Democratic Party. That's a concept. It's a construct. It does not exist. What you do have is a Republican National Committee,
Right.
and you have a Democratic National Committee, we call the DNC. And very few people are members of the DNC. It's actually very difficult to be members of the DNC. Um, and so they manage the annual the every 4 years a presidential convention process, and they control the primary process for president. And they don't do much more than that. And very few people are actually DNC members. So that's a thing. The Democratic National Committee is like a thing. And then we have 50 states, and each state has their own state party. Republicans have their state party, the Democrats have their state party, and in New York we have the New York State Democratic State Party,
Mhm.
right?
Run
And
by Jay
so
Jacobs, right?
what? And Jay Jacobs is the chair of the state party.
Mhm.
And then we have 62 county, and very few people are actually members of the state party. In fact, I mean, more than DNC, but there's not many people members of the state party. And then you have each state has county parties, and in New York State we have 62 counties, so we have 62 county parties. I mean, New York City has 5 counties within New York City that are coterminous with the 5 boroughs. Um, so there's actually 5 separate county parties within one city within New York City. So we have 62 county parties. I'm a county committee person, so I am because I've been elected, so I'm a member of the Kings County Committee. So I'm a member of the Democratic County Party. But that's all but after my election, that's all I'm a member of. I'm not a member of the state party or of the DNC.
Mhm.
So when Hakeem is asked this question, he didn't explain it that way, did he? He didn't explain to people that which party we're talking about. We talking about that county parties? We talking about that state party? We talking about the DNC? Like, what are we talking about here? So, as a matter of just fact, right? Fact is that Mandami is not connected to the DNC, and he's not connected to the state part. Steve, is he connected to the state party as an elected city official? I don't even know how that works.
I don't know. I know DSA had a while ago elected a whole bunch of people to the county committee. They were basically, because, in Queens, most of the county committee is vacant. So, they were filling a bunch of spots there, but I don't think he holds any spot. But I know a lot of DSA people do.
Right, so he might, so there is some so there, I don't know this answer, but there is some process when when you're a publicly elected official and you're a member of the state party. Well, you're registered in that state party. There is some process that you get membership in somehow this in the state party, that you get some vote in the state party. I'm not exactly sure how that works. So when Hakeem Jeffries is asked this question, he can definitely say no, because you can see Miami's not really part of this. He's not really part of this process. He's not part of this paradigm of party politics now. But we do have this whole issue of the issue of the public exposure, the the voters, the general public, how they view everything. So
Mhm.
about expressing values, about expressing the priorities of what people want government to do. So in that situation, he's got like he's got that proverbial soapbox, right? He's got an ability to communicate. So it would really, Hakeem Jeffries is not the person to give you the answer. The answer really is does Mandani want to invest the time and the effort to communicate outside of New York City? Is his message resonate? Are there warm receivers out there to receive this message? I mean, these are unknowns. What happened to AOC is that it's the reactionary echo chamber that kind of like boosted her into national prominence, and so it served their purposes to to accelerate. I mean, I think she would have gotten there anyway, but they accelerated her national rise to attention. And I think that's what's going to happen here is that the reactionary echo chamber is going to accelerate Mandami's national appeal and notoriety.
But I think it's happened already.
It could happen more. I think we're not. We're not at the. I think we're someplace in the middle. That's what I'm saying. I think it's already happened. We're not at the end, but we're someplace in the middle now.
Mm-hmm. Steve?
I'm going to take this an entire different place from where Blake took us.
Okay.
I don't think that there is a face of the Democratic Party because, and there shouldn't be, because we should be the big tent party. And we should be taking, all different types of people, all different types of philosophies, and being under one tent with a a overall moral basis that we all believe in. And I think last night kind of proved that because Mamdani won in pretty much a landslide in New York City, but at the same time, Spanberger won in Virginia, and Mikey Sherrill won in New Jersey. Now, frankly, Spanberger is probably not going to win in New York City, and Mamdani is not going to win in Virginia. But this is what we have to do as a party. We have to make sure that we're bringing in people who we're not monolithic. And that's something that the Republican Party has really become. The Republican Party has essentially become this white nationalist party that if you don't fall in line, then you're cast aside. But we're as the Big Ten Democratic Party, we need people like Governor-elect Spanberger in Virginia, and we need people like Mamdani, who's going to win in New York City, and we're going to need people like Raphael Warnock, who's going to win in Georgia. So to me, I don't want a face of the party. I want faces of the party, and I want a lot of them. And I want a lot of them that are under this big tent that we can all get together and disagree sometimes. I disagree with some of the things that Mamdani is proposing. The rent freeze doesn't make sense to me. But you know what? I can't agree with everybody on everything. But we can have the same goals and the same moral authority and respect for human beings. And this is how I think we succeed as a party.
Is Cuomo done?
One can only hope.
I think he could stick a fork in him, he's done.
Really?
People should. I mean, really, people should be waiting at the Port Authority with a bus ticket for him. They should be waving. They should be waving there because he promised he moved to Florida.
That's right. I heard that. Yep. So I think it's gonna be interesting because I'm gonna go back to talking about my right of center friends.
Mm.
They say if you thought that de Blasio was bad, just wait. So I think people who are right of center are thinking Mondami's gonna fall flat on his face.
Oh, they're going to be very disappointed in that
Okay.
because the difference between a De Blasio and a Mandani is that De Blasio drank the Kool-Aid. He actually believed his own public relations, his own message, and he wasn't sweating the details. Mamdani is different. He actually does sweat the details, and he's not, and this is the irony. The irony of this entire campaign is that he's not an ideologue. He's
Okay.
That's not what he is, because, and he's very clear, because he says he's a democratic socialist, but that doesn't mean that he subscribes to all the democratic socialists agenda. And he's very clear. People just listen to him. He says that. And so he's very clear about that, and he's about being pragmatic and what works. And I think that um he knows he doesn't have the experience, and he says it all the time. He says, I'm going to get, when I don't know stuff, I'm going to get people who have the experience to get the job done.
Right.
As Steve was saying, the Republican Party has become a MAGA cult party, and where it's loyalty to the leader that is the expertise that's required. The quality that's required is your loyalty and your lockstepness.
Mhm.
So, but that's not this situation. And I think that you're going to find out some very interesting things. A lot of the biggest proposals that Mamdani has, of course, he's going to have to deal with the state legislature.
Mhm.
And also another thing, a little interesting thing that people haven't noticed is that for the last, ever since the legislature gave Bloomberg control of the New York City school system, which is the largest school system in the entire country by far, every mayor has gone to Albany to with their hat in their hand saying, please, 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 please give me the waiver, because the statute's never been modified. It's only a waiver that the mayor should have mayoral control over the public schools in New York City. So we have this process where the mayor has to beg to get the waiver. Mamdani is saying, stop. I'm not so interested in that waiver. I want to do a different system. I want something else. And so he's already flipped it on the legislature, because nobody wants to go back to what the statute provides. People don't even know what the statute even says anymore. I mean, I know because I was involved with the Board of Ed, so I know what's involved. But it's been a long time since that statute machinery has been turning. So so now he's got leverage. I mean, it's an incredible thing. He's got leverage over the state legislature by saying, you know what? Don't give me that waiver. I'm not interested. And then the legislature is going to be stuck, because they're either going to have to come up with a new statute, or they're going to have to modify it. I mean, the governor and the legislature are going to have a lot of heavy lifting, which they don't want to do. I mean, Cynthia, is the governor and the legislature, do they need anything added to their plate?
Mm.
So
Right.
he's got, so he's, so because he's going to need the legislature and the governor to give him these tax increases.
So you think he'll be up here a lot?
I think until he gets what he wants.
Okay.
Yes.
And,
Because
I think I add one thing to this about the difference between Mamdani and de Blasio. And, I worked for 6 years as council in the city council, and, had to deal with de Blasio. And, I had helped him run back when he first got elected in 2013. And, I look at his administration as a disappointment. And I think part of it is that, I don't know. I don't know if the people around him were the best and the brightest, de Blasio, and I don't know if they were listening to other people. And one thing about Mamdani so far is that he surrounded himself with some really, really good people. And just today, he announced his transition team, an all-women transition team, and all four of them are very impressive. So the fact that, he's surrounding himself with very, very bright people, and I don't think there's going to be a groupthink mentality like we have in the White House. So, I think he's smart enough to know that he's going to have to listen to people. And, if something that he wants isn't realistic, that he has to, give some concessions or modify it, I think he's smart enough to do that.
So I think that the conversation that we've had is wonderful, because um before June or around June, you and I, Steve, have talked about who was going to win the primary. And you kept saying, oh, Cuomo's going to do it. Well, then all of a sudden, on primary night, I first really realized Mandami's going to be the mayor. And it's like he went from completely unknown outside the city of New York to this rock star across the country. And I think that he, in my opinion, is going to be the face of the new Democratic Party. That's my thoughts.
Well, I remember when we spoke a month before the primary, and I'm like, Cuomo's Cuomo's gonna have this. And um, Blake, I don't know if you saw it the way I saw it, but it was like, let's say 4 weeks before the primary that Memdani really had this surge. And he had a great team, a great field operation, and Cuomo had nothing. And it was really those last 3, 4 weeks before the primary that changed everything.
No,
See,
I no, I agree. And actually, I was resigned. I was beside myself because I did not. I wanted Andrew Cuomo on that bus to Florida way before that primary. And
Mhm.
so, but I was reading. Well, you didn't have to read the tea leaves. You didn't have to. There was no reading a tea. You didn't need to read the tea leaves. It was the facts were out there, and I was really, really upset that we were going to have that Cuomo was going to win that primary. And but Mandami was there, and he was working, and he was diligent, and he had the volunteers and the staff, and Cuomo was just really bad at his job. I mean, he was just really bad being a candidate. And if you remember, the
Right.
last time he ran for governor, he actually didn't run a campaign the last time he ran for governor. He
Mhm.
actually was kind of like half bad even then. And so he really had lost his ability. Campaigning is not some people, is it campaigning like riding a bicycle? You don't if you don't do it for a long time, you just jump on it and you still have that memory of balance, or is it
Right.
more of a finesse of dance steps that you can forget the dance steps? And he really either forgot the dance steps or he just didn't want to do the dance steps. I do not know, but he wasn't doing the dance. And it was
Right.
obvious to the voters he wasn't doing it. And he was bitter. He was bitter. He was angry. He was looking old. He was acting, not quite even looking old. He was acting old. And so the voters like, you know what? Why we don't need to do this.
Right, right. So, I really enjoyed talking to both of you. And both of you are obviously going to keep a keen eye on what he does and how it's going to affect the city. So I'd like to have you back from time to time and give us an update on Mandami's progress as mayor of the city of New York, if that's okay with you guys.
Sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Let's have final thoughts. Steve, you start.
Well, I mean, my final thoughts are it's more like a final hope. Um, you know, we're enduring um an awful situation nationwide right now. You've got masked thugs with no identification, no badges, unmarked vehicles, disappearing people off the streets. Our economy is dealing with inflation and loss of jobs and rising unemployment at the same time. We haven't seen that since the 70s. There's this cruelty that these MAGA people seem to enjoy, and they enjoy the suffering. And I I have a hope after last night that enough people are saying that that's not what the United States, that's not what America is about, and that we need to stop it and move in a different direction. We can't be taking healthcare away from working and middle class families. We can't be taking food away from people who need food assistance. And we can't be taking food and medicine from the poorest people on the planet, causing millions of people to die. I'm hoping that people are waking up and we're going to move away from that.
Blake?
Yeah, we have a lot of challenges, and there's already a big resistance movement. It has to be even larger. We had 7 million people out for the No Kings protests a few weeks ago. There's a magic number in political science of 3.5%, and that's a tipping number. So we can get 3.5% of a population out on the street to protest. At that point, whoever the regime is that's running the government, at that point, you have enough of the voice of the people to actually make some real changes in the country. You have enough force and power. So we had 7 million people out on the No Kings protests, but 3.5% of 330 million Americans is almost 12 million people. So we need to increase those people on the street from 7 million to 12 billion. So 7 million is a lot, 12 million is a lot, but if you have to go from 7 to 12, we can, that is somewhat doable. And I think the way that the president's been acting, and with the government shutdown, where we have 41 million people who are not going to have their SNAP benefits, or only half of their SNAP benefits. You're going to have 21 million people who are going to see dramatic increases in their health insurance premiums, and even a lot more other people are going to see increases in their premiums because of what's happening. There is a pathway here to have more than 12 million people protesting, so we can put an end to the current situation that we've been dealing with. And having a Mamdani elected just gives more support, more push, more logistical help in that process. And we're going to have, and unfortunately, I think we might see things get a little bit worse before they get better. And so, which is really unfortunate and sad, and it kind of, but we we have to keep our eyes on the prize and stay focused. But I think we're in for some really hard times this next couple of months.
Mhm. Okay, so Steve and Blake, let's talk again and keep the conversation going, because I think the two of you give, great analysis. And, during Mamdani's tenure as mayor, I think we could have pretty interesting conversations.
Oh, absolutely.
And so you've been listening to Steve Behar and Blake Morris. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Focus on the Candidates. And please, if you like this channel, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you like this program, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks, guys. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a wonderful day.